Turkey says the Syria-bound passenger plane that was forced to land in Turkey last night was carrying Russian-made munitions. The Moscow airport, though, that dispatched the flight insists there was no illegal cargo on board. Anyway, F-16 fighter jets intercepted that flight on its way from Moscow to Damascus. At the time, it was carrying 37 people. A lot of details coming through. Tom Barton can furnish us with them. He's our correspondent across this story. Tom, what exactly did the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan have to say earlier on then?
Turkish Prime Minister Recep Erdogan said that military equipment and ammunition, Russian-made, was found on the Syrian plane bound for the Syrian Defense Ministry. That contradicts the earlier statement of Moscow that any military equipment on the plane was not of Russian origin. Moscow says that documents of the plane were checked in Moscow and were found to be all legal and present and correct. However, Turkey says that it forced the plane to land because of an intelligence tip-off.
Now, it's not the first time Russia's come under scrutiny for its links with Damascus, though, is it?
It's not. Russia's supplies to the Syrian government have received a lot of criticism and scrutiny since the beginning of the uprising in Syria. The Russian government is at pains to point out that its arms contracts with Syria are very long-standing ones, that they comply with international legal norms, and that it supplies only defensive weapons, not for use against civilians. It is still not clear what was inside those boxes taken off the plane, whether it was, as some Turkish government reports suggest, communications equipment or missile components, or whether it was something else. It is not clear as well who was responsible for that cargo.
Tom, a lot of accusations flying around in every direction today, but back at Turkey, Syria and Russia saying that this plane was potentially endangered by the fact that those fighter jets were flying so close to it. Must have been terrifying for the passengers on board looking at those fighter jets just outside their window. What have they been saying to RT?
It has indeed been a very angry dispute today. Russia says that Turkey's actions endangered the safety of passengers. Turkey, in its turn, has said that it warned the plane not to enter Turkish airspace, a warning that was ignored. Witnesses inside the plane, once it had landed at Ankara, spoke of seeing the Turkish security forces enter the plane, handcuff the crew and begin their search. One flight engineer that RT managed to talk to spoke of how, in his view, Turkish security services acted with excessive force.
Turkish authorities told us they wanted to take all the boxes out. We said that it was not a problem. We just needed to see a warrant. They said no. First, we will unload the boxes. I insisted that we needed to see a warrant. They left and came back in an hour with 10 armed soldiers. They pointed their guns at us, handcuffed us, put us on the ground. Then they drove us back to the plane in 2 vehicles.
The plane was kept on the ground for 8 hours before being released and continuing its journey on to Damascus, minus that part of its cargo. However, the concerns are that this all feeds into the very tense situation between Turkey and Syria, made especially tense with last week's artillery strikes across the border from both sides, and that this may possibly contribute to push both of those two countries closer to war.
All right, Tom Barton, thanks for bringing us up to date with what we know there tonight. Let's get some more thoughts on it now and talk to author and journalist Afshin Rattansi. He's been keeping a close eye on developments. On developments around Syria. Right, Afshin, I hope you can hear me tonight. Good to see you. Thanks for being on the line. Now, in June, US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton accused Moscow of delivering attack weapons to Syria, but then backtracked on her allegations. Why are Washington and its allies so keen to accuse Russia of illegally supplying arms to Syrian forces, do you think?
Well, as Moscow said, there have been long-standing arms contracts with Syria, and it surprises me that the Syrian government doesn't have enough radios or equipment. They have quite a large army there in the Middle East. This is terrible in terms of Turkish sovereignty, in a sense, because this intelligence tip-off, as your Russia Today reporter talked about, this is Washington telling Prime Minister Erdogan, who says he's so independent, to go for it, use the F-16s. At the same time, the Americans are putting 150 troops on the Syrian-Jordan border. Does President Obama want a war, and why is Prime Minister Erdogan doing America's bidding like some sort of neo-colonial colony? It's a disaster.
Let's talk about this plane and what could have or could not have been on board it. We heard what Tayyip Erdogan had to say earlier on. Now, an official from the a Russian arms export company said today, I've got the quote here, so I'll read it out. There were not and could not have been any weapons or systems or military hardware equipment on board that passenger plane. Went on to say, if it had been necessary to ship any military hardware or weapons to Syria, this would have been done through the established procedure rather than in an illegal way. That's what Rossborough Export have said. I believe it's that company. How does that sit then with what Erdogan said today? It's complete diametric of it, isn't it? Completely opposite.
Well, exactly. I mean, it seems an absurd way of sending arms to Syria on a passenger A320 Airbus. I mean, that's not the way it works. This is Washington playing Erdogan as a slave, and Erdogan as a NATO member doing whatever Washington tells them. I don't know whether President Obama wants some kind of war. Some people saying it's about gas pipelines. But as for the actual equipment, there are many other ways for the Russians to get their arms into Syria to support, let's face it, a government that's fighting a Islamist Wahhabi onslaught. How ironic. The Americans saying that they want to destroy al-Qaeda-linked elements in Afghanistan and are at the same time trying to stop those forces against it in Syria.
Well, going on from what you're saying, that Russia is, of course, at odds with Turkey and its allies over how the conflict in Syria should be resolved. Ankara even backed fully fledged military action. Why do you think it's keen to paint Russia into a corner over Syria?
I think it's quite dangerous for the United States to be doing this, especially as most of the world presumably takes Moscow's side in this. We know that there are geopolitical resource, there's that context to this. The South Pars gas field, Qatar is an enemy of the Syrian government because of this new gas pipeline that was signed back, I think, in July of last year. The fact that Leon Panetta is signed over for troops to go to the Syrian-Jordanian border, presumably they will be fighting Russian weapons in any case if they start to move over the Syrian border. It's up to Lakhdar Brahimi, who's talking with the Saudis, I understand, but is due in Damascus to do something. But again, it's about time, I suppose, if things get really ratcheted up for Moscow and Beijing to urgently convene at the UN Security Council, because this is getting out of hand.
OK, Afshin, thanks for your thoughts tonight. It's appreciated. Author and journalist Afshin Rattansi on the line from London.